In the previous video/lecture of US Imperialism 101, we went over the basics. To come back to Michael Parente in Against Empire, we went over how imperialism is a system in which financial elites forcibly expropriate the land, labor, resources, and markets of overseas populations. The end effect is the enrichment of the few and the impoverishment of the many. Imperialism involves coercive and frequently violent methods of preventing competing economic orders from arising. Resistant governments are punished and compliant ones or client states are rewarded with military aid. Attached to no one country, international finance capital is interested in making the world safe for its investments and for the overall system of capital accumulation. Now in this video, we will be diving into the client state and its role in the system, as well as how the national security state makes this possible. Hi, my name is Joey, and this is the Geopolitical Insurgent. Coming back to the central chart of imperialism, and to do a brief review, you have the United States and you have Country X. Country X has land, labor, resources, and markets. Now, a multinational corporation from the US, they want to exploit this. From exploitation of any one of these, the corporation accumulates capital, which, as discussed, is the core component of capitalism, and overall enriches itself at the expense of the people of Country X themselves. Now, Country X can prevent exploitation and subsequently falling prey to the global capital accumulation system through certain policies. We discussed previously, for example, how nationalizing oil will ensure that the country reaps the benefits from its own natural resource rather than the overseas oil corporation. Now, what happens when Country X does not allow itself to be exploited? Well, it's simple, and let's bring ourselves to the national security state. The national security state of the United States, or you could simply refer to it as the state like I do, includes the military and intelligence apparatus, most notably the CIA. Now, its job is to maximize global power on behalf of the ruling class, which includes the economic and financial elites, as well as the multinational corporation you see here, who seek to exploit foreign countries, as you see. What does this mean? Well, the corporation simply sees the world as its market and must be able to access any country through its influence on the state via economic and political means. The state in turn guarantees access to any country of the choosing of the corporation. To put it in simpler terms, think of the state as the sword and the corporation as the dollar. The sword must follow the dollar and vice versa. To make the system work as intended, both must be present and work with one another. Now, coming back to guaranteeing access to the country for the corporation, this means the state takes action against Country X if they refuse access to the corporation. Refusing access comes in the form of policies that Country X can undertake. Now, let's go over a specific case study. In 1953, the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran planned to nationalize its oil resources. The Iranian people demanded it, as Western corporations had for years reaped the profits off of their oil rather than themselves. As nationalizing the oil threatened corporate access, the national security state acted to protect that access. First, the CIA led a coup and overthrew the Iranian prime minister. They then propped up the Shah, who ruled until the Islamic Revolution of 1979 saw him ousted. As the Shah was a US puppet, he would in turn protect the access of Western financial elites to Iran's oil. So getting back to the definition of imperialism we opened with, the government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh constituted a resistant government who was punished. He wanted to nationalize Iran's oil, and the corporation, the Western financial elites, saw that as a threat. So he was punished, and the Shah, meanwhile, constituted, in this example, a compliant government or client state. A client state exists to protect the interests of the ruling class, as the Shah did during his reign. The Shah, in turn, received military aid from the United States, using that aid to not only enrich himself, but to brutally oppress his own population. The purpose of this was to keep the country safe for Western capital to exploit. That is the role of the client state. So to sum it up, the national security state guarantees access to the land, labor, resources, and markets of overseas populations on behalf of the financial elites. If there's a government in a country that resists this setup, then the state overthrows them and installs a puppet regime. Because of the overthrow and subsequent ascent of the puppet regime, that country is now a client state up for sale where access to the financial elites is guaranteed. So the national security state guarantees access by making way for the client state, who then in turn guarantees that access. The national security state and the client state work hand in glove to make this happen and to make the world safe for international finance capital and its overall system of capital accumulation. Now, the CIA-led coup in 1953 is just one of many examples of how US imperialism has played out. Many of you may be wondering why the United States would, especially nowadays, need access to oil, for example, considering that the United States is self-sufficient in oil. Remember, even if you don't need something, it does not mean you don't seek to profit from it. Having that access not only benefits the corporation, but it also gives Washington the ability to dictate terms to access for this or any resource. This means that they could put pressure on geopolitical rivals such as energy import-dependent China by leveraging its access. We will go into more case studies of US imperialism in future lectures. For the next episode/lecture of US Imperialism 101, we will be expanding upon the client state when we discuss how imperialism has evolved over time and how capitalism in particular has played a role in that. For now, this is a report by me, Joey. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.